I'm going to go through the factoring quiz and do each of these problems. I'm going to go pretty fast, so feel free to slow it down or pause it or rewind it at any point. This is exactly what you will see. I might make your makeup or the retake quiz a little shorter for time's sake, but any of these problems that you see here could be the same type that you would see on your makeup or retake. So I'm going to notice that this first one has 4 terms. Anytime you want to use your grouping method, which is 2 and 2, and you factor out your GCF. So you figure out what goes into both 14 and 16, that would be 2, and you take the smaller number of variables. I'm dividing each of these by 2b squared, and whatever I have left over goes in the parentheses. Same thing in the back 2, I factor out the GCF, which would be 5, and anytime this term right here is negative, my GCF is negative. So I'm going to make it a negative 5, and divide both of these by negative 5, gets me 7v minus 8. Again, negative times a positive is negative, a negative times a negative is positive, and if I did this right, and I did, my parentheses should be the same, and I can go right to my final answer, which is 2 sets of parentheses. What you see in one of the twins that you see there, they go in either one, the order doesn't matter, and then our GCFs in the other. So that is the final answer for that one. Okay, always checking to see if there's a GCF first before we do anything. And these all have a 6 that goes into them. Remember, the trick is to start with the smallest number and see if it goes into the other 2. Use your calculator. If not, you would go down from there. If 6 didn't go into both of these, I would try maybe 2, because 2 or 3 goes into 6. Well, you always want to try the biggest number first. So these are divisible by 6. So I'm going to put a 6 out in front. Whatever's left over will go in the parentheses, similar to what we just did a second ago. So 180 divided by 6 is 30, okay? And now you ask yourself, is there anything else I can do? I recognized what's in the parentheses as one of my chart problems. It's a quadratic trinomial, where I multiply and add. Now I'm ignoring the 6 for right now. He'll be in my final answer, but for this part, we're just using the 1 that's in front of the r squared times negative 30. Remember, a times c. And then b, which is the number in front of the r, is 7. And then I'm looking for what 2 numbers multiply to get 30, add to get 7. Not worried about signs here in the beginning. I'm just going to say, I know 10 and 3 I can make a 30. I know with 10 plus 3 I can make a 7 if I make one of those negative. Remember, you make your decision on who's negative in this column, not this column, because it doesn't matter who's negative here. Either one is negative, we get negative 30. Over here, 3 has to be negative to get a positive 7. So make sure it works in both situations, and it does. So now I'm going to go right to my final answer, which is the 6 just hanging out in front, and then r's in the front. I'm just splitting this variable into 2 parentheses, and I'm going to bring the plus 10 and the minus 3 over. Again, the order doesn't matter as long as the 3 is negative and the 10 is positive. Okay? And remember, we were allowed to go right from the chart to our factored answer without having to do any extra steps, which is coming up in a minute, because of the 1 being here. Anytime there's a 1 there, we are happy, okay? Because we can go right to our answer. All right, next problem. Let's see if there's a GCF. Yes, 3 goes into both 3 and 6. We have 2 m's or 1 m. We always take the smaller number. I'm dividing both of these by 3m. Whatever's left goes in parentheses. You can check this by the distributive property. Again, I'm not writing it every time, but this is what I'm doing. I'm dividing by 3m. Whatever's left goes in the parentheses. And clearly, there's nothing I can do with m plus 2. In this case, after I factored out the GCF, I was done. Okay. Next one, again, always looking for a GCF. Both of those numbers are divisible by 5. And here's our first exposure to difference of two squares. So whenever I recognize this, I'm ready to go right to my factored answer. So that 5 just carries on down, just like the 6 above. And I have two parentheses. One's going to have a plus in the middle, one's going to have a minus. But other than that, these parentheses will be identical. The square root of n squared, we split the n, because n times n is n squared. And the square root of 100 is 10. 10 here, 10 here. And that is it for that one. Okay. Next, looking for a GCF. There is not a GCF. I recognize this as my quadratic trinomial, just like number 2. That means it's the chart problem. And again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. You do not have to show me the chart. You can use a different method. I care about the work over here. This is the way I do it. So remember, A times C and B. So we're looking for the two numbers that multiply to get 1 times 21, which is 21, and adds to get B, which is 10. Right? So A is 1 in this problem, 1 times 21. Right? So we love it when everything's positive in a problem. That means all of our numbers over here are positive. Pretty easy one, right? 7 times 3 is 21. 7 plus 3 is 10. Because of the A value of 1, we get to go right to our final answer of n plus 7, n plus 3. Order doesn't matter. And we're done. Okay. Number 6, no GCF again. I recognize it just like number 5, just like number 2. It's a quadratic trinomial. It's a chart problem. So the two numbers would be 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. 5 times negative 4. And my B value, what we see in front of the n, is just a minus symbol, but we know it's a negative 1 or minus 1. Okay? So to make a 20 and a 1, again, I'm not worried about signs when I first start this problem. I just kind of want to jot some numbers down, and then it's easier, in my brain anyway, to work with the signs once I have the numbers written down. And again, just like I said above in number 2, we make our decision in this column. To get a negative 1, if you don't know your signs really well, you still have summer brain, pick up your calculator and try it all different ways to get a negative 1. And that would be the 5 being negative. Check it over here. Make sure you get negative 20 when we make the 5 negative, and we do. Now, if you look back at number 5, once we found our two numbers, we were able to go right to our final factored answer. That's because A was 1. A is 5 in this problem. So this is the type where you have to do the extra steps. We can't just jump to the answer. So if you remember, my method is to bring down the outside two terms. Remember, the sign in front of a number stays with that number, and we split the middle. I'm going to split that middle into these two numbers. I'm just going to add a variable on. What variable? Well, since we're using n, we'll keep with n. So that would be negative 5n plus 4n. And again, it doesn't matter what order you put those two numbers in. You could have put the positive 4 first. The reason I put the negative first is so I don't have to remember to factor out a negative like we did up here. Whenever that first number in a parentheses is negative, you have to factor out a negative. That's the only reason I didn't put the negative second, is so when I do my grouping, and that's the next step, if this is positive, I just don't have to remember with that negative. But if you had switched them, no big deal. You would have had a negative 5n there, and you would have factored out a negative 5. Okay? So the GCF of the first two would be 5n. Divide both of those by 5n. I'd be left with n minus 1. You have to put something there. This should be, just if I check this using the distributive property, I should get 5n. So 5n times n is 5n squared. 5n times negative 1 is negative 5n. Good. I'm going to bring that plus sign down. I can divide each of those by 4. And again, n minus 1. My parentheses should always be the same when I get to this step. And my final answer is, remember, n minus 1, your twins, you can put them in either parentheses, doesn't matter. And then those GCFs, 5n plus 4, in the other set of parentheses. Okay? Make sure you didn't factor something out way at the beginning, because that should go in our answer, right? Sometimes we factor something out and then we do more work. You don't want to forget about that GCF that you factored in the beginning. All right? Number 7 was our hardest problem. It was an extra credit. I actually gave you points if you got it right, and if you got everything right in it, I snuck in an extra credit point for you on the quiz. I'm not going to do that on the makeup. This is straightforward, get your points or not. There is a GCF in all of those. Okay, it's not 12. I would start with 12 and go down from there. So keep going down. 6 goes into 12, but 6 doesn't go into both of these. 4 goes into 12, but it doesn't go into both of these. 3 goes into all of those. So my GCF will be 3. 48 divided by 3 is 16. 45 divided by 3 is 15. Okay? Give myself a little boundary there. And so now I'm going to go a little further with my chart. So again, I'm going to do A times C. 4 times 15 is 60. And my middle term, B, is 16. So I need to find the two numbers that multiply to get 60, add to get 16. That would be 10 times 6, 10 plus 6. Again, we love it when everything's positive. We don't have to mess with negatives. And we cannot go right to our answer. Our answer is not k plus 10, k plus 6, because our a value is not 1. We only get to do that when the a value is 1. So ignoring the 3 for a moment, I'm going to do what I did on the last problem. Bring down the outside 2. Remember, the sign in front of a number stays with it. And split the middle. I'm going to split the middle into these two numbers. It does not matter which one you put first, especially when they're both positive. Just don't forget to put the variable on both of them, whatever variable we're working with. Remember, the reason we're splitting this is to create two terms, but it should still equal what's above it. So 6k plus 10k is 16k, right? Parentheses, parentheses. GCF. The GCF of these two is 2k. Divide that by 2k, that by 2k. Again, check it. Distribute. Do I get these two terms? I do. Over here, I can factor out a 5, and I should get the same thing in parentheses, which I do. Now I'm ready to write my final answer. Don't forget about this 3 that you factored out at the beginning. It needs to be in your answer to get full credit. Then we have our two parentheses. Again, the order doesn't matter. 2k plus 3 are twins, and the 2k plus 5. So that's really the hardest type of problem you can get. You have a GCF in the beginning, kind of some bigger numbers, and having to do all the steps. That's a pain, but it should be getting easier. Last one, again, no GCF. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into what I recognize this is as the difference of two squares. It's just like number 4, except with no GCF. 2 parentheses, 2 different signs. The square root of 25x squared would be 5x. That's going to go in the front of both parentheses. And the square root of 1 is 1. That goes in the back. Okay, so I am going to create a quiz with maybe 5 questions on it from these types. And you can retake this quiz for forgiveness, meaning I will let you keep the higher of the two scores, and you'll get one shot at it. But just know that even if you don't take up the opportunity to do this, or you don't do well the second time, you are expected to know how to factor. So if you need more help with factoring, you can go to the free Tuesday tutoring in the Media Center from 2 to 3, or I can recommend Tutors for Hire. But moving forward, we really need to know how to factor. Okay? Good luck.